everyone, welcome back to alkaline hydroxide 784. And today in the GP overview series, we will be looking at secularism. So by secularism, I'm referring to how it's done in terms of policies and law in the sense. So the definition that we are looking at here is in terms of a secular state, it's a state that enacts policy that do not have religious considerations taken into account. Religious consideration means that they don't follow a certain religious law per se, and instead, most of the time, they have a freedom of religion and they allow everyone to practice their own religion, but they don't impose a certain religion on the entire society or something like that. And the law is a bit more constitutionally derived, and it's just meant for everyone and not really based on a certain religious law or something like that. You know what I mean? So generally in secular states, you will see that there's freedom of religion, and you'll see that schools are generally also secular, so there's no religious connotations in the education system, or there's no religious teachings for the most part. And yeah, that's basically the idea of secularism. So in Singapore, what is the current situation? Because, if we want to start somewhere, we have to start here, right? Singapore considers itself a secular state, and I think it is a secular state because it doesn't follow any religious law per se, and the schools are also very secular for the most part, in terms of the government public schools. So in most of the public schools, you don't really see students wearing any religious garments for that matter. And of course, there are some exceptions and stuff like that. And that's because there were some debates among some parents who didn't really like the fact that they couldn't let their kids wear a hijab or the headscarf that Muslims wear to go to school. But the thing is, the idea behind not allowing them to wear that in primary schools and secondary schools and JCs is because you're technically removing all religious aspects from the education system, and it's more of a secular system in a sense. And also, it's actually kind of allowed for them to not wear it while they're still studying in primary, secondary, that kind of thing. Apparently, that's what I've heard. But yeah, of course, their parents were not exactly into that kind of thing, and therefore there are other options. For example, there are madrasas for, or other religious schools, because I'm not really sure when it comes to the other religions. I'm pretty sure there are other religious schools, not just madrasas. So there is some kind of flexibility still, but for the most part, it is somewhat secular. So now let's look at another country, which is France. In France, we see that it's not just in schools, but even in public, you don't really allow religious garments per se. And so by religious garments, it can be either the very ultra Christian people who wear the nun kind of, I don't know what that's called. Is it like a veil or something? Or it could be a hijab or something like that. So they don't really allow any of that. And even in public, they generally don't really allow people to wear these kind of religious garments. And even in the beaches, we know that in France there's this incident where the police arrested someone wearing a bikini. Well, I guess that's kind of sad, but yeah. And in French schools, generally they actually give them the meals in the school itself without the students having to buy their own meals. The school just gives a catered, like a buffet style meal to everyone. And this kind of is quite biased towards Christians in terms of the dietary restrictions or dietary allowances, and it's quite hard for those who do not follow that particular diet or have religious requirements that prevent them from eating certain things in the meals. So in a way, you might think, oh, like in other countries they give food as part of the school plan and all that, right? And you think that's cool, but actually the Singapore system isn't that bad because it actually allows people the freedom to buy what they want and also take into consideration their own requirements at the same time, which in a way it's actually better than catering meals to everyone. Unless you actually take into account everyone's dietary restrictions and religious restrictions when it comes to their meals and give them catered meals, then that would be great. But usually when that's done, they don't really take into account all of the restrictions that everyone has. Yeah, so anyway, that's a topic for a different day. But the point is, in France, it's actually kind of really secular. They even have like a topic. If you learn French or something, you will get to have a topic entirely on secularism in France. So it's a big thing there. And because of another thing that they have there is, that whole what's that? Just we Charlie that the the satirical thingy, that satirical newspaper, and they had like the they did satire, and since they have that so-called freedom of expression of opinions, it kind of is a bit controversial there, and then it led to attacks in their own building because of that. So I guess this isn't very new, so it may not be worthwhile talking about it anymore, but if you want to know about it, I'll just put some links there and you can read up more on that issue. I'm pretty sure you all already know what I'm talking about by now. So yeah, if you pause for a second here and then realize, wait a minute, why does it seem like all of the discussion here generally revolves around hijab or like Muslim related stuff? Je ne sais pas. But yeah, I really don't know, but I'm pretty sure there's other religion-based states or other considerations that occur due to other religions. So yeah, that my question here was, how does it work for the other religions? Does it differ for them? And what about a situation for someone who is a non-Muslim minority in a Muslim majority country? So do they have it better or do they have it worse compared to a Muslim in a non-Muslim majority? Yeah, that's a question you can ask for your own thinking. So yeah. And of course, you might have wondered why I haven't talked about whether secularism is good compared to non-secularism, aka a state that is religious. Because, well, the reason why I haven't talked about it is because honestly, most of the times it's considered better. Well, I mean, it favors the majority. Wait, isn't that kind of reminiscent of how the majority can control the minority? Okay, just kidding. But the point is that in this case, the majority isn't really a homogeneous majority, but more like when the country has a lot of diversity in sense, and there's a lot of different groups. By having secularism, you put most of them in the majority, and it's actually better that way. But if the country isn't very diverse, then maybe it's possible for it to be a religious state. Yeah, so if you think about it, in Singapore, we don't, like, the government kind of bans anyone talking about religion, for that matter, as in their opinions on other religions, basically, like criticisms or things like that. So they don't really like that kind of stuff. And the reason why they don't like that kind of stuff is because that can easily lead to, I don't know, conflicts in interest and clashes and riots and stuff. And we don't like riots, so yeah, that's the reason why in Singapore you're not really allowed to voice your opinions against someone else's religion. So yeah, and if you look at the other kind of situation where the country has a very high majority of possibly 80-90% of one religion to follow, like to follow religious law in the sense, or would it be sensibly better for that country? Yeah, that's the question. I didn't make it sound like a question. Oops. Yeah, the question is whether it would be better for the country with a very high majority of one religion to follow religious law. Well, technically, yeah, it would be better to do that because when you have such a strong majority, it there might be quite some rejection of secular policies because secular policies will not be consistent with religious law on in the sense. There's definitely gonna be some differences between the two. And sometimes if your majority is pretty much really majority, then it would be a bit unwise to follow secular law when they all would prefer following religious law. Of course, you might be wondering, wait, what about the minority? Even if you care about the fact that there's a really high majority, there's still people who are not part of the majority. But what I feel like, this is my opinion, it might be important to just allow them to do their own thing in a sense. Like, important to take care of their needs. Basically, not make it compulsory to wear religious garments for them, or allow them to wear what they need, their own religious garments. At the same time, not angering the majority too much by, if in a way the religious law kind of has some sense to it or is somewhat consistent with normal law, they just keep that as the law itself. Like, maybe just have a general modesty or just like celebrate certain festivals nationally in the sense. That is technically my opinion, rather than following super 100% closely to the majority's religious law. It would be better to have a little bit of deviation here and there and have use it more of a suggestion rather than the actual law. Yeah, so that is my opinion. If you have a different opinion, you can argue for it in your own way. If you didn't understand what I just said, then sorry. Anyways, let's look at more case studies. I think that's more useful for you than my weird opinions. Yeah, okay. So the first one would be Vietnam. So, Vietnam is considered a secular state. If you're really bored, you can go to this link. There's like a whole bunch of pages about Vietnam. But if you already study H2 history or something, I guess you don't really need to reread this information. If you already know it, then yeah, you should know why it's a secular state for the most part. So here's some quick info. Back in when there was actually a South Vietnam and North Vietnam during the Cold War time, it's kind of like how Korea had a Korean War. There was also a Vietnam War. But the difference between Korea and Vietnam is that Vietnam actually reunited. So yeah, that's pretty much the difference. Of course, that is kind of oversimplified, so it's not really pretty much the difference. But if you want to understand it in the most simplistic terms, yeah, that's how it works. So when there was actually a South Vietnam and a North Vietnam, basically in South Vietnam, there was this guy called No Dinh Diem, who was okay, I'm pretty sure I pronounced that wrongly, but anyways, he was installed there by the U.S. government. And he was not viewed favorably because he was Catholic and he was foreign educated. So, yeah, and most Vietnamese are not exactly Catholic nor foreign educated, especially at that point of time. I'm pretty sure now there's definitely a good number who are foreign educated. But anyway, that's not the point. The point is that he was this weird elite person compared to the other people there. And Vietnam then united after the Vietnam War through the power of wanting to unite. Yeah, actually it's not really due to communism, more of just nationalism. They just use communism as they just use it as their cover up for the actual reason, you know what I mean? Yeah, and also to get some kind of support from the communist countries. So yeah, basically after uniting, their policy was mostly just communism. Of course, it's not really like, it's not as strict as Soviet or China, I suppose. It's a little bit more adaptive. And they also follow Confucianism, so which isn't really a religion, it's more of a set of principles, and you don't really have to follow, like some people can, different people of different religions can follow Confucius principles in a sense, so it's not really something that is a religion. So in a sense, a lot of Vietnamese are not very religious in the traditional sense. So if you look at Wikipedia, it says that today 86% follow folk religions or are not religious. So in a sense, you wouldn't really have a religious law for their set of religions, or maybe their folk religions are a bit more of like ritualistic, or just, they have to do a bunch of rituals over the year or something else, which doesn't really require any very, it's not really like something that creates a whole law for itself or something. Yeah. And of course, there are minority groups of Christians and Buddhists in Vietnam. So that's why Vietnam actually allows religious freedom, because they don't really care about that part of it. Like, they're not very worried about people having different religions or not, or anything of that sort. And they're more interested in their so-called communism and the nationalism in a sense. That's what they're more into. So they allowed religious freedom, and they even allowed schools in minority areas to teach in minority languages, which means they were actually kind of nice in that regard. But the thing is, the only thing they were probably very strict on was being communist. I think more of when they were recently, like when they were newly united, they kind of cared about that kind of stuff. I'm not sure about today. I don't think that's really the case anymore. But yeah. So in other words, Vietnam is happily a secular state, even though technically it has a very huge majority of a certain kind. But the thing is that majority isn't very religious to begin with, so it's better off just being a secular state. Yeah, that's the first case study. I mean, there's nothing much to really talk about it. You can, like, the main time period where there was actually conflicts based on religion was really, really long ago. So yeah, I have nothing to say. Okay, but we'll see another mention of Vietnam later on. So yeah, let's move on. Now let's look at a different location, another secular state, which is South Africa. So actually, South Africa is pretty interesting. Actually, if in general, if you hear South Africa, the first thing you think about is the fact that it has a whole bunch of national languages. If you actually read enough about it, I guess that's the first thing that usually pops up to you. You realize, wow, there's so many national languages there. And it's because of its history. Like, there used to be a time where there was colonialism and stuff like that, and now there's definitely this sizable group of white people, and also and the majority of Africans, and also maybe a lot of other different minorities there as well, which I'm not very familiar with. So yeah, you can just look at that on your own time. But the thing is, they allow freedom of religion because there's all these different groups of people. But I think the main religion there seems to be Christianity in its different forms, because I don't really know all the different forms. So yeah, but that's really the main one there. But at the same time, it's not really it's not really like a majority that's really big. So it's better off for them to follow like secularism there, because of all the because of the differences in different religions and the different groups of people that are there. Actually, I don't really know much about it. So, but you can use it as a case study if you want. If you can go and find out about its history and see whether there's any conflicts due to religion or not. Yeah. Anyways, now let's go and look at some states which are technically not secular states. Yeah. So the first one is actually a bit of a surprise, or maybe something that you don't usually think about, and it's Samoa. And Samoa is a Christian state, so yeah, I found an example that isn't the first thing that comes to your mind. Yeah, it's that's pretty interesting. Okay, so uh, apparently officially became a Christian state in 2017, and before that it was already pretty much like one. So I guess it kind of worked well for it, and it has quite a high majority of Christians there. So I guess it works for them. And yeah, that's pretty much it for Samoa. If you want, you can just read the article for more information. So the next one is Cambodia. And the reason why I put Cambodia here is because of Vietnam. So Cambodia is a Buddhist state. And yeah, actually Cambodia has a really, really high majority of Buddhists. It's like 97% of people. So, yeah, that's pretty impressive of a majority. And also the fact that usually Buddhism isn't really it doesn't like impose restrictions on other people as much, if you think about it, or at least there isn't much to really restrict per se. The main thing that they usually would care about is you had to respect like the idols of Buddha, or like drawings of Buddha, in a sense. That's usually what they expect any visitor to do, and it seems to work. So yeah, in fact, if you visit there, you wouldn't even think about that, except for the fact that there's a lot of temples there, and they probably ask you to respect maybe the Buddhist idols and stuff like that. So here's the interesting part. There was this period where Vietnam tried to invade Cambodia. I think this is the only not so great thing that Vietnam has ever done. I'm pretty sure the rest of Vietnam's history was actually pretty nice in a way, except for this one thing that they've done, which is something to do with the Khmer Rouge. And yeah, so because of that, like during that period of time, the Khmer Rouge was kind of against Buddhism or something, or at least they were quite secular in the sense. And because of that, Buddhism in Cambodia isn't as significant as it used to be. Like it doesn't really have such a great impact in terms of the policies now compared to before Khmer Rouge. But actually, yeah, just if you want to know more about Khmer Rouge, we can talk about it in a different episode, because that is a whole other thing of its own. It's actually quite a really sad thing that happened. It ended up with a lot of but it's also an interesting period of time, because you can see the interaction between ASEAN, UN, yeah, all the reactions from these big groups and stuff like that. So yeah, it's um it's a time, I guess. So if you want to know more about Cambodia per se, you can go to the Britannica link. And here's the final case study, which I think we probably already know a lot about, which would be sorry. Yeah, which I believe it's Saudi Arabia, because it is a pretty restrictive country in many ways, and I think we all know that. And it's more restrictive for like women per se. So yeah. And even if you visit there, you're probably supposed to follow, like you cover up completely, and you have to actually do that if you don't want to get arrested and stuff. So yeah, we already know about this pretty well, and there's a lot of news stories about Saudi Arabia, so you can just look that up on your own. So that's the last case study, and that's like the one that was the most obvious. So this is definitely a religious state. So yeah. So you have seen that there's many different kinds of religious states and secular states, and there's this kind of range of how strict they are or how lenient they are, in the sense. whether it's in terms of secularism or religious law in the sense. And of course from here it's a bit hard to like say, oh, this is wrong or this is correct, because this is about religion, and when it comes to religion it's a bit contentious in a sense, a bit of a topic that you don't really want to talk about. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Okay, so so like the purpose of this episode is just to introduce to you the different kinds of states that exist when it comes to this particular topic. So if you do get a question on secular states or secular policies, maybe you can use these as, you know, case studies to reference. So you can go, and if you want to focus on a certain aspect, you can use these as your, you know, reference countries, and see what's the difference between the secular one and the religious one, or difference between two different secular states or something like that. So yeah, that's really the point of this particular episode. And this topic was something that I proposed, so because I don't know, I found it pretty interesting of a topic in my French class last time. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. If you found this video useful, please press the like button and subscribe. And with that, I would like to say thank you and bye.